Mark Walsh here from Pragmatic Personal Growth. This is a video on being religious but not spiritual. So, what we're going to look at today is this common saying of people that will say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, and what might be some of the problems with that, and why being actually religious may be beneficial. So, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're not like sort of hardcore atheist and don't think that any spiritual life whatsoever is irrelevant. Though, of course, actually, there's forms of spirituality, like certain forms of Buddhism, that would certainly fit with a kind of hardcore atheism. But I'm assuming you have some kind of interest in the spiritual life. And if you do, what you'll generally find, the prevalent kind of liberal leftist view of spirituality is that I'm the boss of me, and there's all this different stuff out there, and we can just pick and choose. It's like one of my friends described it as the spiritual sweet shop. The spiritual sweet shop. And in the spiritual sweet shop, we can have a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Taoism, a little bit of Hindu yoga, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, maybe read the Sufi mystics or the Christian mystics. Tends to be the kind of Eastern ones that are considered the most kind of exotic, the most kind of spiritual by default because they're strange. Esoteric has been confused with spiritual. So what does religion add to this? You think, well, that's great, isn't it? We have all this freedom. We have, choice. That's a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. That it's not just like, my family are Irish Catholics originally. So if I was born 100 years ago, I'd be an Irish Catholic. That's that. Whether it suited me or not, whether I agreed with it or not, my choice was Irish Catholicism or nothing, basically just saying that's not true and being rejected by my community. Pretty heavy consequences to atheism back then. Nowadays, of course, we have all this choice, which is great. So what is the problem with that? Well, the problem is we choose from our ego rather than anything that might be a kind of intelligent, wise, compassionate choice. So I choose what is easy rather than that which could bring discipline to me. Also, by the picking and choosing, we miss some really good stuff. So I'll take the example of Buddhism I'm a practicing Theravadan Buddhist. So Theravadan Buddhism is sort of old school Buddhism. It doesn't get more conservative than Theravadan Buddhism, actually, in the Buddhist tradition. The kind of one of the original founding schools of Buddhism. You'll find it in places like Thailand and Sri Lanka. And it's actually pretty similar all over the world because the kind of conservative thread that runs through it. There's monastic rules, for example, that are exactly the same if you're in a monastery in, I don't know, Washington, D.C. or a monastery. There's one I go to quite close by to here in Brighton. Almost the exact same monastic rules as if you're in a monastery in Thailand or Sri Lanka. So this example, for me, I was meditating years ago. I've been told meditating is good for you. The mindfulness craze was the beginning of that craze. And I tried it and I really got a lot from it. So I was like, yay, great, meditation. So I started meditating regularly and I found it had a positive effect on me. So this is the spiritual practice, as it were. And I was combining that with all sorts of other things, all kinds of other beliefs. And what I found was that I realized I was missing a lot. For example, meditation misses an ethical practice, other videos on this channel. And I realized that a lot was missed out through just picking the bit that maybe was most accessible to me. There's a saying, swallow the whole fish, which means, you've got to take the whole thing on. And what I realized after a while was that, I looked at other Theravadan Buddhists and I thought, okay, this seems to be having a positive impact. And this religion is basically one that is in keeping with my values, seems to be pretty logical, rational, kind of fits with my kind of Western rational framework of looking at things. There's some stuff in it that I wasn't too keen on. It sounded a bit kooky, but I thought, no, I'm going to do this in its entirety. I'm going to submit myself to it. This puts your own ego out of the middle and gives you something bigger to commit to. It also means you're accountable to a group of people. So other Buddhists can challenge me. Other Buddhists can say, hey, you're not meeting this ethical precept. The 5th precept states that we don't use intoxicants, blah, 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 blah. And I, as a Buddhist, have to accept that challenge and talk to them about it. And there's a community of support that's built around it, which is both supportive, but also in terms of challenging. So if I'm not just completely going off on my own bullshit. So, for example, on this more kind of conservative personal growth trend that I'm on lately, I'm actually meeting a Buddhist friend of mine in about an hour, Mark, and I'm going to sit down with him and say, okay, is this kind? Is this wise? Where could I be going wrong on this? What are some of the risks in this? And we can talk about it from this point of view of Buddhism. He's actually quite leftist in his politics, but we have a central thing that we can relate to, and rather than just like me, in my opinion, yeah. So some of the sort of less palatable things of Buddhism, I still took on as a discipline, and I think this is why why does religion exist? Well, it exists as a structure and a discipline. It's conservative in that sense. it says something has gone before us that has probably got some wisdom, and even if it's picked up some odd things on the way. I'll give you an example. When you offer food to Buddhist monks, you have to offer it, and you have to say certain things to make it formally offered. And it's very formalized, and it can seem kind of silly, but that comes from a historical place. And the act of giving is a big part of Buddhism. Dana, which is not necessarily known in the modern mindfulness world so much. It's like before meditation, this is the practice in, say, Thailand, the act of giving, letting go of attachments through giving things. And it's like, when you give anything with seeds in, you have to like stab it with a knife and say it's dead. Now, from a scientific point of view, this is silly. It's true. If you actually look at the history, you can see that how this developed. It's because there was kind of proto-Jains, you might say, in early Buddhist communities who had very strong views on life, and the Buddha just said, okay, so this is what we need to do to include those people. Now, it doesn't really take any time. It doesn't go against my values. It's not really a big deal. So when I'm in the monastery and I'm giving food to monks, that's just what I do. No big deal. And I put my ego aside when I'm doing that. So I think that's tremendously powerful in religion, even if there's things that seem silly, as long as they're not fundamentally against our values or hurting anyone. Why not, right? That is actually a practice in itself to give oneself fully to the religion. You get the benefits of the tradition, you get the benefits of the established wisdom over, in this case, a couple of thousand years, 2,500 years. Honestly, like, no matter how smart you are, do you honestly think you're smarter than 1 or 2,000 or 3,000 years worth of tradition of people that have come before you? Even if they've accumulated some baggage, surely they've come up with some good stuff that you're not going to come up with, even if you're the smartest person in the world. I think this is the great benefit of following a religion, as well as the community that brings. So I've kind of settled on Theravadan Buddhism, and I think this is the difference between the sort of old conservatism that said, well, you're born into something and that's how it is. We still have some choice. We can shop around a little bit to fit what typologically suits us and what fits modern values. It's different kind of churches, for example, if you're a Christian and you feel kind of heart called to that, which I totally get, actually, you might say, I'm going to become a Unitarian or a Baptist rather than a Catholic or whatever it is, and you might decide you like that tradition of Catholicism. There's something really powerful in that. Let's take Catholicism as a kind of classic example. From that background, I know a little bit about that. My mum was actually a Catholic nun for a while before she decided to leave that as a novice, which you can do, and then later met my dad. So I know a little bit about that tradition. I was at a funeral in Poland, and my good friend of mine, Pietro, and his wife had sadly died. Rest in peace, Kasia. And he was an atheist, and she was too, actually. But it was assumed that they would have a Catholic funeral, because most people in Poland are Catholic. And the ritual of that funeral was very beautiful. For me, as someone who knows about Catholicism, for all the people there was something comforting and familiar in that tradition, which holds you in a time of need like that, when your partner's just died or your friend's just died. And I really saw like, wow, this is powerful. This is powerful to have this lineage, they would call it in martial arts, this tradition, this thing that goes back a long way that can hold you, even if you don't believe, everything in it. So I think there's real sense in that, and committing fully, eating the whole fish, as the Zen people say, committing fully to a religion. So that would really be my challenge to you guys. Is kind of like, if you have a tradition, to commit fully to it, even if some things like the stabbing of the grapes seem a bit silly. To commit fully to it. This idea of surrendering yourself, in the same way as I did a video on marriage, saying it's a similar thing of surrendering oneself to one person. So much benefit in that. Is that something you could look at doing? Maybe it takes a period of time. I'd love to hear in the comments like the benefits of having a religion. So, this video is entitled Religious But Not Spiritual. Well, of course, the spirituality is in there as well. But if I actually had to choose, I'd choose religious. And the reason is, I just see better behavior as much as anything from religious friends than my friends who are, supposedly spiritual, but just doing what the fuck they want, letting their egos and desires push them around. They think that's freedom, and it's not. It's the cage of being pushed around by, from a Buddhist point of view, greed, aversion, and ignorance. Sin from perhaps a more traditional Christian point of view is the cage of being pushed around by that. It's not freedom. It's not freedom at all. So I would actually choose as friends, for example, people who are religious but maybe aren't big meditators or anything like that, just because of their ethics and their values and how they live. So I think, well, if I would choose that from another Why would I not choose that for myself? Now, of course, you know, we can do both. So don't be fooled by the title of this video. Of course, you can have an internal spiritual practice, you know, a prayer life, a meditation life, you know, whatever it is, and actually see the external as part of spirituality. Yeah, see the social, the communal, the rituals, the funerals, all those things as part of spirituality. And I just don't see people inventing them well, you know, in the sort of new agey hodgepodge, bit of this, bit of that. There isn't the traditions. I don't see them doing ritual well. You know, I have a good friend of mine who's an interfaith minister, and he does kind of like ritual for people that don't necessarily have a religion, and that's possible, and he does a good job of it. We use it as part of our personal growth courses, for example, like transitionary rituals as part of courses. And so it is possible to work with ritual, but to step into a tradition with a lineage, with this, it's like a spiritual weight that just comes through it, you know? There's a way in which it's hard to explain rationally. There's a way in which the weight comes through. And as much as anything, we're creatures of the familiar. So religions give us this structure, this community. They repeat things. Alan de Botton talks well about this, actually. He's got some good thoughts on what a secular religion would be like. And until that's invented, I say, let's use the religions that we have. You know, these, for most of you watching this, you have access to a number of religions that you can have some choice in and then commit to. So that would be my advice. Advice is always stinky, but you know what? Do it as an experiment, right? Don't think of this as something for life. Like for a year, commit to a faith that you already have some contact with, and see how that goes. You know, there's so much in all of the faiths. You know, I know a lot of Jewish friends that are really committed to Judaism as a faith, and there's so much in Judaism. They sort of don't really need to sort of tag on bits of Hindu stuff from their yoga practice. So yeah, the risks of the sweet shop, the benefit of commitment, being held by a religion, being religious but not spiritual. So if you like that, as ever, like the video, subscribe, do the little bell thing, and you'll get more. And comment below if you've committed to a religion and the benefits that that brings for you.